What does that mean?
Rise.
When Gotham is ashes, you have my permission to die.
Have you been up my wishing tree? It's where I come to think and dream. And now I'd like to show you my wishing tree. Jam on, where we can laugh and giggle and scream. Imagination is the key.
Okay. I promise I'm not up 40 feet in a tree for no reason. I do this because I love you guys. You can see up pretty high right now on a really thin branch. This thing goes, I'm screwed. And there won't be a review. So that's how you know. I guess this would be a good time to Snapchat people. So there I was on my Saturday afternoon, 40 feet up in a tree. Now we get to ascend the vines. Thankfully there's vines in this tree, otherwise I would not be able to get up here. So let's go down.
Here's a quick note before we start the review. If you have any questions, please make sure you have watched the entire review before asking them. Also check the comments section below because chances are someone probably already asked that same question that you're about to ask. Now on to the review. Welcome to the Blackout Mini Spider Hex in-depth review. In this review, I'm going to be going over all the characteristics of the Blackout Mini Hex, as well as all the information I have gathered through the various tests I have done with these aircraft. Also check in the description below for a link to my build video. In that video, I go over everything I use in these builds, as well as how I built them. Oh, and I almost forgot. As a promotion for launching my new website, droneworksusa.net, I'm going to be raffling off this new blue Blackout Mini Spider Hex you see here. In the description below, I'll give you all the details on how you can go about winning this Blackout Mini Spider Hex. Okay, to start out with, the Blackout Mini Spider Hex is a beautifully designed 290mm Spider style hexacopter. If you're looking for this aircraft, you can get it at minihquad.com. If you're looking for a full-blown ready-to-fly aircraft like the ones you see here, visit my website droneworksusa.net, where we build custom ready-to-fly aircraft for our customers. So besides the aircraft's beautiful construction, the most important part of the aircraft is how well it flies. I found it takes a little bit more time to tune this aircraft compared to, say, the Blackout Mini H Quad, although it's really not a bad thing. Once you get this thing dialed in right, it really does fly like a much larger aircraft, just in a smaller form factor. So you get all the benefits of, say, a larger aircraft where the wind typically doesn't mess with them as much and affect their flying performance. Also, the massive amounts of power that this thing has, I mean, it's pretty crazy, especially if you go to 4-cell.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Shut up, Uncle Ben. Just for you, I made a 4-cell version, because I want all the power and none of the responsibility. No, but in all seriousness, Uncle Ben brings up a really good point. If you choose to run nylon props, there isn't such thing as too much power. I personally like flying the 3S version I have, with no GoPro plate on it and just a Mobius camera on top. I found that the Hex can easily outpace any of the mini quads. Even at the Hex's cruising speeds, the mini quads really do have a hard time keeping up. As you can see here, the Hex really just starts to walk away. Even while it's carrying a GoPro, this thing still has tons of power. As you can see, this thing has no problem moving out. Now if you choose to carry a GoPro, you'll notice that it has a little bit more strange flight tendencies. That's just due because of the weight. As you see, when you do a flip, it has a little bit more oblong shape to it and just isn't as fast or as crisp as it would be if you were just carrying a Mobius. And for that reason, I personally like to carry the Mobius as my flight camera. Now there are a couple of advantages of carrying a GoPro over a Mobius that I found. If you carry a GoPro, the extra weight really does let this thing cut through the wind a lot better. I mean, it really makes it a really smooth flight, and you know, you got really good video obviously from the GoPro, so that's a plus. Hero 3 Plus, that is. Another great thing about carrying a GoPro is obviously the frame rates you're able to shoot your video at. You know, the GoPro, you can go up to 60 frames a second at 1080p, so you can do a lot of cool slow motion stuff like this. Whee! Goodbye, Mr. Bird. And what's more amazing, I just hit that power line and flew away without a scratch. Another great thing about carrying the GoPro is it really makes the throttle feel a lot more natural. You start to be able to hover at 50% like a normal aircraft does, and it's not so light on its feet, so you know, every little increment you go higher on your throttle, it's not just jumping up in the air 2 feet. You know, it's a lot more natural feeling. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. This shows the Blackout Mini Hex on 3-cell flying with a Mobius on it. It's a lot lighter than carrying the GoPro, so the slightest touch of a throttle will really make this thing jump up. Now to be fair, that was my very first flight with the Blackout Mini Hex, so I wasn't really used to the whole power curve of it yet. However, I still find it hard to fly this aircraft through the smaller tight areas at slow speeds just because, like I said, every touch of the throttle is so great when you only have a Mobius on there. Now I don't want to sound like the Blackout Mini Hex is just the worst aircraft in the world to take through a small area. It's not. You can actually fly through a lot of small areas with it, just like you could with the Mini H Quad, except for you just have to be a little bit more aware of your size and that this has a lot more power, so just be a little bit more aware of what you're doing with your throttle and a little bit more softer with your movements, and you're pretty much good to go. One thing it took me a little bit longer to get used to is the size of the Blackout Hex compared to the Mini H. I found it a lot harder to get through some of the smaller areas and just didn't give me the warm and fuzzy feeling like I do with my Mini H Quad. That being said, I find the Blackout Mini Hex not as fun to fly in the smaller parks. It's basically like driving a Formula 1 car on a go-kart track. Yeah, you can do it, it's just not going to be the most fun experience. Reason is, it's so fast, you can just get around the whole park so fast. So I mean, you see the whole entire park within 2 minutes, and you kind of start losing interest in it. Also, by the time you get on the throttle, you find yourself having to slow down again because you're just going into some kind of turn or you're coming upon some kind of obstacle. I feel like this aircraft really shines in the larger open areas. Reason is you don't have to always constantly worry about where your throttle's at. You can just shoot around, hit larger gaps in the trees, and not always worrying about what's coming up next and having to slow down for it. Also, since this thing flies a lot longer, the wider, more open areas seem to be a lot more fun to fly because since they're larger, you're not zooming around them 1,000 times and getting bored within the first 5 minutes. This thing can fly for a pretty good time. And that brings us to our flight time data. Yes, I did tons of tests for you guys so that I can try to bring you guys the most accurate flight time test results possible for each setup. Now for those of you that are having a hard time understanding this sheet, I understand your IQ just isn't as high as mine, and that's completely understandable. The only other person I know with an IQ as high as mine is this kid.
It's peanut butter jelly time, peanut butter jelly time, peanut butter jelly time. Where you at? Where you at? Where you at? Where you at? Now there you go, there you go, there you go, there you go. Peanut butter jelly.
So for those of you that don't have an IQ as high as that kid's in mine, I made this simple and easy to understand dumbed down version of exactly what I was explaining on my chart. Here, each of the videos is displaying the longest flight to each of the aircraft. The 3S versions were always carrying a 3300 mAh Nanotech 35-70C battery. I did 2 flights with the 4S versions. One flight I carried a 2700 mAh pack, and the other flight I carried a 3700 mAh pack just to see if it could carry it and how well it would do. Something important to note is I flew the 2 3S versions back to back on the same day. The next day when I flew the 4S versions, it was much hotter. It was about 98 degrees, so that probably didn't really help the flight performance that well. So the performance on them probably suffered a little bit, but not much. Something important to note is everybody lives in a different part of the world at different elevations with different temperatures. So there's a very high possibility that you're not going to get the exact same flight times as me, and that's completely normal. However, these results should give you a good ballpark number about what you should expect to get. Now the reason I don't have a DVR recording of the 4S 3700 mAh pack is I left my DVR at home, and I thought about going back and getting it, and then I said to myself,
I got bronchitis. Ain't nobody got time for that.
However, I still made sure to use only 80% of the pack's full capacity. If you check how much milliamps I drew out of each of the packs, you'll see that I tried to get as close to 80% as possible. Also note, all the voltages are fine. The only one that's a little bit low is the 4S 2700 mAh pack, and that's because it's only a 25C battery, so You know, that's kind of expected. All the other ones are 35C. Basically what I found was going to 4S really didn't improve on anything. Even if you factor in the fact that it was a lot hotter on the 4S days than it was at 3S, you'd still only be adding maybe 20 to 30 seconds to your flight time, if that. So really it's the same exact flight time as the 3S versions. So you're probably asking yourself right now, what the heck would be the point of going to 4-cell over the 3-cell versions? Well, to start, you're going to a larger motor that's the same kV as its smaller brothers, and it's spinning the same size prop at a higher voltage. Even if the voltage of the 4-cell is completely dead, it's still higher than the voltage of a fully charged 3-cell. Also, since the motors are larger and more powerful, they have an easier time making it to the higher RPM range versus the smaller motors. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. Say you have a car that has a 4-cylinder engine in there that gets you 0 to 60 in, let's say, 8 seconds. If you swap that engine out to a more powerful, larger engine, that same car will get 0 to 60 at a much faster rate due to the fact it just has more power and you're not really increasing that much weight. These motors only weigh 5 grams more a piece more than the other 1806 motors, so you're really not adding that much weight for the amount of power you're gaining. I personally feel like if you want to carry a GoPro, going the 4S route would be a much better option for you. One, your motors aren't struggling to carry as much weight, which they're not really struggling with the 1806s, but they're definitely having an easier time doing it with the 2204s. So it's less strain on your aircraft. Also, 4S is great for those extreme power junkies. If you're one of those people that just love to have incredible amounts of power, this is definitely the setup for you. Although I've actually found 4S not as great as you would think. There's actually a couple limiting factors that I ran into with it. The first problem I ran into is the props. If you're going to run 4S, definitely run carbon fiber or at least carbon nylon props. I was running nylon props and they were definitely affecting the aircraft's performance in a negative way. Reason being is they're so flimsy that they were basically just flopping all over the place and you really start losing a lot of thrust. Your motors are basically spinning super fast and the props weren't doing anything because all they're doing is bending and flopping all over the place. The second problem I ran into is the motor bolt pattern for the arms. The current arms I have only allow you to put 2 screws in each of the arms to hold the motors on. Now, flying with 2 screws in the motors holding them onto the arms isn't that bad. As long as you thread lock them, you really don't have to worry about anything. But some people might prefer having 4 screws rather than 2. I mean, it's definitely more redundancy, but like I said, I've never had a problem as long as you thread lock them. If you're running the 1806 size motors, you're not going to have a problem putting 4 screws in. Only when you get to about the 2204 size and up is when you're going to start running into issues. And you can always just drill the holes out, but, you know, like I said, you don't really need to. Okay, now on to the things I love about this frame. Number 1, the power distribution board. The power distribution board makes this thing way easier to build. There's tons of solder spots for everything you could possibly think of on here and more. There's a bunch of holes in the frame that make routing wires a lot simpler and neater. Now, if you look at my frame, you might see a lot of wires mesh wrapped. Okay, I have a lot of things in this aircraft, a lot more than most people typically do in their builds. That's why you see a lot of wires. The board already comes with tons of LEDs on it. However, if you're one of those people that just can't get enough LEDs like me, there's extra spots on the board where you can solder on additional LEDs, or you can do something special like what I did and add a brushed ESC to control your LED's brightness. And I'll go over how to do that in the build video. Another great thing is the flight controller location. Even though the flight controller looks like it's located in the back of the aircraft, it's actually perfectly centered relative to the motors on the arms. There's flight controller bolt patterns for a Nazi 32, Flip 32, CC3D, the Open Pilot Revo with GPS, or KK2, KK2.1, KK2.15, or any other KKs there are. Actually, scratch that, the old ones won't fit, but who cares because they're old. Okay, now I'm going to show the aircraft weights. First I'm going to show the aircraft's empty, and then next I'm going to show the aircrafts with their all-up weight with the camera and the battery. So the first aircraft you're seeing is my 3S version with the brushed ESC and the extra LEDs on the arms. Next is the 4S version. Notice it's actually lighter than my 3S version. The reason is it doesn't have the extra brushed ESC on there or the LEDs on the arms. So even though the motors weigh a little bit more each, it's actually a little bit lighter than the original 3S version I made. And lastly is the 3S version that I had the GoPro bottom plate installed along with the vibration bobbins. The GoPro bottom plate with the vibration bobbins actually adds quite a bit of weight. If you notice, it's already 42 grams heavier than my 3S version that has the LEDs and the brushed ESC installed. I've actually found the GoPro plate adding 55 grams, which on a mini aircraft is actually a lot of weight. So if you're planning on just flying with the Mobius to record with, my recommendations to you would be to not install the GoPro vibration plate and to just strap your battery on the bottom and your Mobius on top. This should give you a little bit extra flight time because you're lighter. These next pictures show the aircraft weights as they were all up weight and flying around. Since there's not much to say here, let's add some music.
And the dream that comes at night Controls up.
Okay guys, so unfortunately we have reached the end of the review. The Blackout Mini Hex has been nothing short of an awesome aircraft to own. It has found a permanent spot in my aircraft fleet. The smaller platform flies much like a larger aircraft, making the flying experience a lot more enjoyable, and it also comes packed with tons of power that anybody would appreciate, whether they're flying 4-cell or 3-cell. This aircraft has quickly become my aircraft of choice for trips. Reason is it's fairly small and it has tons of flexibility. If you find yourself wanting to fly more aggressive, simply put the lighter battery on there. If you want to fly longer and do some more longer range flights, you can go with the bigger battery. If you want to fly with a Mobius, you can put a Mobius on it. If you want to fly with a GoPro, you can put a GoPro on it. Basically, you're getting all the benefits of a 400 to a 500 size aircraft. You get longer flight times than the mini quads, you have more power than the mini quads, you're a lot faster than the mini quads, yet you're still in that same small form factor. So you're still able to do everything pretty much a mini quad can, and you also can do almost everything that a larger aircraft can. I feel like this aircraft fills a really good void, especially if you're one of those individuals who lives in a more urban environment and doesn't necessarily have the wide open spaces to fly the more larger aircraft in a more comfortable manner. So if you're one of those people who have been on the fence about buying this aircraft, my personal opinion is get off the fence and grab this aircraft before they become sold out again, which is a pretty common factor because every time I go into that store, they're pretty much sold out. And if that doesn't tell you something about this aircraft, then I guess you're just a lost cause and you'll have to go back to watching more YouTube videos of other people enjoying their Blackout Mini Hex. I hope this review has been both factual and enjoyable so that you have a better understanding of what the Blackout Hex is about. I've done tons of testing on this aircraft and compiled all the data that I possibly could to bring you guys a review that's honest and true. I don't get paid for anything from anyone for this review, so you can be confident that all the information I give you is completely unbiased. Now for the moment everybody's been waiting for, the raffle. I'm raffling off this beautifully built Blackout Mini Hex to promote my website, droneworksusa.net. In the description below is the raffle rules. They're really simple, there's only 3 of them, so it gives you a really good shot at winning a beautifully built and tuned Blackout Mini Hex. Basically, if you win, you send me your radio and your receiver, I program it to that Blackout, and I ship it back to you. It's that simple. It'll come out the box ready to go. Basically, you'll add your battery to it, hook up your FPV goggles, and turn your radio on, and you'll go fly a perfectly built and tuned Blackout Mini Hex. If you're just looking to buy a non-ready-to-fly frame, check out minihquad.com. Please feel free to rate, comment, and subscribe, and thanks for watching.